Yeah. So let's just do this real quick so we can cover it, just in case people are finding us randomly instead of knowing who you are. Tell us a little bit about your wrestling career, Bobby.
Okay, well, I had my first match September 11th, 1988, over in Hayside, Virginia. I'm just a good old Southern boy from Kentucky. Raised for the first 6 years of my life up in Baltimore, Maryland. Moved to the hills of Kentucky. Been here for quite a long time, but through my wrestling, got to travel the world. And how that started, I was always a fan of professional wrestling since the age of about 6 with the old WWF. And then I took a little break, moved to Kentucky. And one day my brother came out, and to make a long story short, he said, "You've got to see," he's a couple years younger than me, "You've got to see this on TV." And I had no idea what he was talking about. I was outside playing, and probably about 3, maybe 4 years had passed. So I'm, 9, 10 years old, and I said, "Man, that's pro wrestling." And it was the old Memphis wrestling. Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee. And believe it or not, Bill Dundee was doing a sunset flip, and one of these things. And my brother's shorter and stockier, and he even was a kid, he was shorter, and he just started falling in love with Bill Dundee. So that was our connection. We started watching wrestling together. And from there, about 15 years old, still watching the Memphis. I watched some ICW came through. I said, you know what? One day I'm going to be a professional wrestler. That's what I'm going to do. Several years later, several pounds later, training, etc., I got accepted to Professor Boris Malenko's Wrestling Academy down in Tampa, Florida. And I went down there, and everything, he took me out, we shook hands, he put me in a ring, had me do a few things, and we walked out back, and he said, "Bobby, I see a lot of potential in you. I think you have a career in this, but I want you to forget everything you think you know about professional wrestling. And I'm going to start you at square one." And that's what he did. And I shook his hand. I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Malenko." That's why I called him. For years, I still do, but every once in a while I call him Coach. Very seldom I call him Larry. But I was, "Yes, sir, Mr. Malenko." That's fine. And I started on the weekends, then eventually training. Then eventually I was living in Orlando, and this is in Tampa. And eventually I moved down to Tampa to where I could train 4 days a week. And I had access to a ring 4 days per week for a couple hours per day. And he just kept putting me in there with people over and over. And then Dean came into the picture and started really taking over my, training, because it was becoming really advanced. And at this time, I was having matches and things. And that's kind of how I got my start. So from September 11th of 88 until May of 89, I had probably about 15 matches. And I knew everything, but I knew nothing, of course, because no one had really smartened me up. And his words to me were, "Bobby, God bless those guys up there in Tennessee and Kentucky and West Virginia, but all they want to do is punch each other in the face and kick each other in the eyes and rape their eyes." And he said, "They're going to kill each other." He said, "Son, you're going to get killed if you don't get proper training." And that's when we started with square one. And ever since, and I never looked back, man. And I started working shows for him probably in about August of that year, of 89. And man, it's been a blessing to be trained by the Professor, Boris Malenko. And of course his oldest son, Jody, he had a hand in my training, but Dean had a huge hand in my training. Big influence on me because I was a lot lighter back then, very athletic and very teachable, coachable, if you will. So that's kind of where it was at, man. From there, it just took off.
Okay.
Took off.
That's going to lead me down a question here. I got to know your opinion on this. Better